Hey, what's up guys? I'm going to show you how to do some hand-over-hand steering today. So if you're first starting out and you're trying to figure out how to steer the car, the most important thing is to control your speed and do everything really slow and chill. So if I come up to a turn, like if I was going to turn into a driveway here, or in this case here I'm going to turn into a cul-de-sac, I'm just setting my speed up as I go in, just to make sure I'm not going in too fast. Then that gives me a chance to steer the wheel. So all I do is lift my left hand, the right hand goes under, just switching them as many times as I have to. Once the car starts to straighten out, I just let the wheel slide back on my hands. I make sure both hands are still contacting the wheel. And in that case, I didn't have to accelerate, but sometimes the steering wheel won't turn back on its own and you might have to give the car just a little bit of acceleration. But the most important thing there is just make sure you don't give it too much acceleration. Here I'm going to do a stopped right turn. So I get a good stop at the stop sign, roll up a little bit to see past that truck. And I go a little bit past the curb, right hand goes up, switch the hands as many times as I have to, and gently accelerate. A lot of times when you first start doing those right turns, it might feel like you're going to hit the curb. So all you do in that case, just make sure there's no cars coming on either side, and then drive it a little bit further past the curb and then start steering. That way you're well off the curb, you don't have to worry about hitting it. Here I'm going to do a left turn from a stop sign. And a little trick when you're doing turns, especially left turns, you can see in the center of the intersection there's a drain cover, that brown circular thingy. So a little trick is before you start steering, drive out to that manhole cover or drain cover and then start steering. You don't have to drive exactly over it. But basically that drain cover marks the center of the intersection. So if you start steering there, then when you come out of your turn, you're going to be perfectly lined up with your lane. So I can see both of these drain covers generally mark the center of the intersection. So I roll out a little bit, one car coming. So I'm just going to gently accelerate. Once I'm close to the center of the intersection, I start steering and then just let the wheel slide back on my hands. Up here I'm going to do a rolling left turn. So when you do a rolling turn, it basically means you're going in with some momentum. But back here, I'm setting up my speed so I don't go into the turn too fast. And I go close to the center of the intersection. Then I go 1, 2, 3. Then just let the steering wheel slide back on the hands. Another thing that makes it easier, instead of having your hands side by side like this at the turn, as you're approaching, you just set up your speed, put your hands more closer to the top of the wheel, and that just makes it a bit easier to switch your hands. Sometimes you can find neighborhoods outside of the city that don't have a whole lot of curbs on the side or a whole lot going on. So that can make it easier because it gives you a little more space and there's no cars parked on the side of the road. This time I'll do a right turn at the stop sign. So I get a stop with the front of the car at the sign. Make sure there's no cars coming. Drive it a little bit past the shoulder of the road. 1, 2, 3. And just let the wheel slide back. And up here I'm going to do a rolling left turn. So I slide my hands up top. Going to go close to the center of the intersection. And I just go 1, 2, 3. And then once the car starts to straighten out, I just really gently accelerate. But the most important thing on the rolling turns, never go into them with too much speed. That way you don't have to worry about losing control of the car. Now I'll do a right turn from a stop. So I stop with the front of the car at the stop sign, but I can't see past this tree, so I'm just going to ease out a little bit. No cars coming. Oh, one car coming. Looks like they're turning, they're slowing down. Right hand goes up, 1, 2, 3, and just gently accelerate. Whenever you see a car approaching an intersection like that and they have their signal light on, just make sure that you physically see them slow down before you pull out in front of them. Some people will accidentally drive around with their signal light on and not realize it. They might have the music up a lot and they don't hear the ticker of the signal. But once you actually see them slow down, that's where you can pull out and do your turn. Now I'm approaching a cul-de-sac. These are great for learning steering because there's not a whole lot of traffic in them, so you can just take your time. So I'm on the brake pedal, coming in nice and slow. Once I'm ready to start steering, the left hand goes up. And I'm going to switch my hands as many times as I have to. As I'm exiting the turn, I've got both hands up top. Once the car straightens out, gently accelerate. I just put on the power gauge there of the car just to kind of show you how much power I'm giving it as I accelerate out of the turn. So I'm going to drive out toward the center. 1, 2, 3. Not accelerating now, just gently accelerating, and the wheel spins back. And up here I want to turn right. So I've got my signal light on back here. Hands are up top. No cyclist beside me. And as I approach, I'm just gently slowing down just to make sure I don't go in too fast. Right hand goes up once I'm past the shoulder. Then as I exit, I just gently accelerate. One thing you don't want to do when you do these turns is to shuffle the steering wheel, just because it's going to be a lot more awkward and shaky. So if you're going like this, that can make it a lot more awkward, and it can cause the car to kind of wobble. It just doesn't give it like a good flow. You always want to have good flow when you're steering through a turn. Sometimes when people are first starting, they'll have their hands at the bottom of the steering wheel, but you never want to have your hands down at the bottom of the steering wheel, just because you don't have as much control in case something goes wrong or you have to steer. If your hands are up here, then your shoulders are giving you a little more support. I'm gonna turn right down here. All you do with speed bumps is just slow down to a safe speed before you get to them. Generally, it's like 25, 30 kilometers an hour. There's different types of speed bumps too, so you might slow down a bit more for some and go over other ones a little bit faster. These ones here are more like speed humps, so they're not as like intense. So if I did go over them at like 35 or something, like there'd be nothing wrong with that. But you just kind of generally judge like whatever's a comfortable speed. There's no exact speed to go over them. You'll see on some of them that there's like big gouge marks taken out of them. And that's just because sometimes people see them at the last second and they slam their brakes on because they think the car is gonna like get air or jump or something. And what happens when they slam the brakes on is the car can actually sink down and then smash off the bump. And here you can see I'm turning right. There's a bit of a drop off there. So if I was to steer too early, I would end up hitting that. So all I'm gonna do, same as the shoulder of the road, I'm just generally driving out a little bit into my lane and then I start steering. And that one was uphill, so I had to accelerate just a little bit more as I was coming out of the turn, just because the car didn't have a whole lot of momentum. So if the car doesn't have much momentum, then the steering wheel won't spin back as easily. This is a downhill turn, so I want to make sure I'm on the brake pedal as I approach. That way I don't go in too fast and lose control. Coming in nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm approaching a cul-de-sac, so I'm just slowing down as I go in. And I just generally drive around the outside. Left hand goes up, right hand goes under. Switch them as many times as I have to. Not accelerating yet. Once the car straightens out, right about there I start to accelerate. You'll find once you get used to it, you might start to accelerate a little bit more out of the turns. As long as it's smooth, that's okay. But when you first start, just really take your time. Don't feel like you have to accelerate a whole lot. That way you don't have to worry about losing control or anything. So once I get to the point where I want to start turning, my left hand goes up. Then I just switch my hands as many times as I have to. As I'm coming out of the turn, I got both hands up top. And just gently accelerate. This neighborhood isn't on the water system like the other neighborhood we were in. So it doesn't have the drain covers in the center. But I can also use the yellow line there as a point of reference. Or just generally make sure that I'm driving out close to the center before I start steering. And down here I'm going to do a rolling right turn. This one is sort of downhill, so it's going to give me a bit of momentum. So I'm going to stay on the brake pedal the whole way through. So I've got my foot on the brake pedal, and I keep it there through the turn. Still on the brake pedal, car straightens out, now I let off and just start to accelerate gently. And another way you can do it is to manually return the wheel. Just make sure you don't accelerate too much when you do that, because that will cause you to wobble or maybe lose control. So here I'll do a manual return of the steering wheel. So I'm just doing my hand over hand steering. And then when I want the wheel to return, I can just do it like that. But it's just a little more harder to do it that way. And I'll do it again here. So it's really easy to lose control when you do it like that. So if you do it like that, just make sure you're going super slow. It's definitely a lot easier just to get used to letting the wheel spin back on your hands. It will give your driving a lot more smoothness and flow. I usually put my signal light on about 300 feet away from the intersection. Then if there were any cars behind me, they've got plenty of warning that they'll need to brake just because I'm slowing down to turn. 1, 2, 3, and I accelerate. That one was a little bit more acceleration than normal. But the main thing is, as long as you have control of the car, that's the most important thing. Now down here, I'm going to go into a cul-de-sac that goes downhill. So since I'm going downhill, I'm just going to stay on the brakes the whole way through until the car starts to straighten out and face uphill. So I've got my foot on the brake pedal. Still on the brakes. Don't have to worry about getting too much speed. Still on the brakes. Car starts to level out. Now I'm off the brakes and gently accelerating. So I'm going in a little bit past the shoulder of the road. Then I start steering. So I'm on the brakes back here, and I'm just slowing down gradually to the stop sign. Drive out a little bit. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I'll turn my hands a little bit like this just to make it easier for the wheel to spin back. I'll do it down here. So instead of having my hands like this as the wheel slides back, I can also just kind of turn them a little bit and let it slide like that. As long as both hands are controlling the steering wheel and contacting it, then that's the most important thing. Now I'm going to be going into another downhill cul-de-sac up here. And the most important thing is I just make sure I don't go in with too much speed. So as I'm approaching, right about here, I'm on the brake pedal. Give it as much pressure as I need to. Going in nice and chill. Hands are up top. Off the brake pedal. Car starts to straighten out, then I just gently start accelerating. If you do feel like you're losing control as you go into a turn, don't hit the gas. Sometimes people do that because they panic. Just get on the brakes right away, and then that way you know you can stop the car, get control again, and then continue your turn. And the way to think of it, if you're turning left, then when you start steering, your left hand is going to go up. In this case, I'm turning right, so that means my right hand goes up. So the most important thing to remember when you're doing hand-over-hand steering and just generally getting used to doing turns and steering is never go into a turn with too much speed. If you're coming in on a downhill like this, like say I was going to turn down here, I just make sure I'm on the brakes back here. Then I know I'm not going in with too much speed and I'm not going to lose control. And you won't have a problem. You'll know you have control, and then that will make you more confident and allow you to get used to the technique. On my website, I added some Spotify playlists and also some areas to explore around Nova Scotia and Halifax. So I do a little bit of hiking sometimes. So sometimes I'll make videos and stuff of the different cool areas around. So you can check that out if you're interested. So just take your time when you're getting used to doing turns. And you won't have an issue. You'll have control of the car. And that will make it much easier to learn. Thanks for watching.